Hey there, are you grieving the potential loss of a loved one or feeling overwhelmed with the loss of someone you care about? If so, you're in the right place. Lisa Hartung here, and this podcast is designed to guide you through topics surrounding death and dying. We'll dive into multifaceted aspects of grief, offering you a blend of personal stories, expert insights, and practical advice for your grief journey. May this be a safe space for you to learn, listen, and ask questions about your own life and loved ones. So grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Giving Grief Grace. We are in our mini series with Ian McCartor from the Ash Rose Foundation. We are currently in week 2 of the Ash Rose Project, where Ian is helping guide me on a grief journey, all while creating a beautiful portrait in honor of my mom. And I am sending him some of mom's ashes. And so each week we dive into some grief related conversation. And then that gives Ian a little something to take away and create on his end each week. So we started out last week was honoring the past. This week, we are working through creation, processing grief in the present. And so I'll hand it on over to Ian so that we can dive into this week's processing through creation.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, week 2. It's always nice to come into week 2. It's a little more like week 1 feels like the winter in some regards. It's like reflecting on a lot of memories that bring up a lot of difficult emotions around the loss and the longing and the things that you miss and treasure. And week 2 is kind of allowing the bloom to start taking form and really just start assembling the pieces of what was addressed last week. And concurrently, that's what I'm doing artistically with the artwork, putting these pieces together and letting it assemble. And so I'm looking forward to hearing how this week was a little different for you than last week.
Yeah.
Just overall, was it a different feeling or it took you to a different place?
I I really struggled this week, and
Okay.
maybe it was because like all things political that are going on, and then just the here in North Carolina, it's just been really snowy and icy, and so a lot of like hibernation and darkness, and so
Mhm.
I guess it wasn't as emotionally charged as last week was.
Yeah.
And I'm now, I guess for me, it was thankful for the time in this space that we are giving on this part of the grief journey. And then thinking about honoring the past and then, okay, what are we going to do in the future? And thinking about that, how I'm planning to share mom's legacy and light. So,
Yeah, it's interesting with the snow and the darkness and the contained aspect of that, the dormant aspect of that, or like the dead resting aspect of your environment, and going through this process at the same time with the theme of the garden, just having this be such a powerful, like visceral environment to embrace and allow. As I've heard you say, the winter of the soul is an important one to honor that is difficult to be present with because it's cold sometimes and it's still and there's not a lot of signs of life sometimes, and the trust and the faith and the hope and the movement through a respectful movement, not rushing,
mhm,
but presence with movement. Because I think even stillness in this space moves something. There nothing is static, and
mhm.
it can allow a different type of movement though. But yeah, it's interesting. This is kind of a little prolonged winter, and then having to shift our actual presentation day to the first little chapter of spring is really special, I think. So let's
Yes.
embrace it. But yeah, let's walk on through.
Yeah.
So the focus of this week essentially was exploring emotions and understanding how the creative process can support your healing.
Mhm.
So, first question, what emotions have surfaced for you since starting this journey?
Yeah. I think. And I'm looking down because I'm reading my journal that so Ian provided me with a beautiful journal and I've been journaling each day. So, pausing to remember and be able to record the thoughts and feelings in a meaningful way has been really helpful. I've definitely felt sad and lost and alone, but I've also been grateful for the time that mom and I shared together and for the light that she continues to shine on our lives in new ways. And just thankful that I'm thankful that she shared me how to bloom where I'm planted. But yeah,
Beautiful
it's
thing.
like all the emotions, I think, have come up.
Yeah, good. Just to see it like that's all material. All the lights and the darks and everything in between. And I think that's a beautiful thing to reflect, just in your example too for the people watching, it's so important but so difficult to go to those darker places and
Hmm.
allow those real shadowy feelings of feeling lost and alone and without to be present and not to overrule you, but to be present and to be integrated.
Yeah.
And the metaphor I like to use relating to just the analogy of the art being created is in order to have the richness of detail and the evocation of life when you look at this artwork, you need the darkest of the darks
Yeah.
and the spectrum of all the things in between into the lightest of the light. And if you muted all those things down into a monochrome, it wouldn't come forth from that paper in the way that your journey, if you mute these feelings and you mute the spectrum, you're not going to feel. That bond won't be as solidified and free with
Yeah.
that remembrance and with the ongoing love. And so I'm glad you were able to take that time and feel those things.
Yeah. It's in order to feel true love, you have to experience true grief,
Hmm.
right? And the full spectrum of it allows you to live fully into the emotions and the experience of, right? What did they say? Grief is the shadow side of love.
Yeah, the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in order to fully embrace true love, you have to be ready for the grief, or be acknowledging that it is proportionate, and that's, I think, the human condition of the vulnerability of allowing yourself to love fully and not fearing the pain of the loss. And I think that's a common one, for so many people. It's that arm's length approach to
Yeah.
living
Hmm.
because of the pain and not knowing what to do with the pain and not feeling hopeful through the pain in any way. It's just pain is bad. So if I love, I'll feel pain, and so love is bad, and there's this like pushback against the depth of what it can be. And, thank you for sharing your experience because I think that that's a very important consideration for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Number 9. How does thinking about your mother during this creation of their artwork affect your grief?
So I just had thoughts of like new life and flowers blooming into something new.
Mm.
And you're creating this legacy piece of artwork. But it also, I really miss her presence. So thinking about, I'm excited to have her present in a new way moving forward. And also feeling like letting go of a piece of her, which I'm not necessarily letting. I was thinking of like shipping the ashes to you, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
hopefully they'll get to you. There's more where that came from. So like,
Yeah, hopefully we don't have to
if she did go
pivot
on a
in that
wild
way
ride, then, so be it.
around the world and back again.
Yeah. But then I was feeling like a sense of release and freedom. And like I wrote flying high with joy.
Mm,
And, she gets to go on this adventure. And then
mhm.
she's becoming a piece of this artwork, which is just
Wow.
really cool. And thinking about
It's
sunlight
ritual.
streaming.
Hmm.
streaming from above and that, the kiss of warmth on your face when you feel that sunlight. That's how I've been thinking about the journey of the creation.
That's beautiful. I love that ritual. Just all the intentions in there of the release, the going on an adventure and becoming something new. That's such a beautiful salute,
Yeah.
you know.
She gets to be repurposed, which I think she would really like. She was all about
Hmm.
upcycling. So,
Yeah, well, yeah, this is definitely an upgrade from being in a jar.
yeah.
I just think just symbolically and spiritually and creatively and just as a message, a message of life and of newness and an intention. It's you're choosing to do this and to create, and that's a big deal. You know, it's difficult to take that step because there is a mystery to it, and there is this pain of letting go of something and to
Yeah.
allowing to become something new. And in the
Hmm.
journey, that's the cycle. It's always this letting go and allowing, and this releasing and allowing.
Yeah.
And
Trust the
that's
process.
yeah, yeah. And I always like to come back to the seasons. It's nice to follow that, and as the metaphor is, just to trust that though you can't see it, it's becoming. And
Hmm.
within yourself, that process of letting go and allowing is truly allowing something to happen. And this movement of becoming.
Yeah. There was the meditation this morning um was the quiet before the bloom.
Oh, perfect. Of course, that's how it goes. Your mom's just like, here you go.
Here you go.
Happy Sunday before your
Yeah.
Ash Rose meeting. It's so sweet.
Hmm.
Mm.
So,
That's it. It's the suspense, and that's what I like to encourage with this project. You're not seeing this artwork until the day of, and it's the suspense of the trusting and the allowing and the giving without knowing the outcome.
yeah.
You're sharing your heart in these episodes in this process through your writing and allowing that giving of your mother to me, to all who's listening, become something. And we don't know what that's exactly going to look like, but it's becoming something. And really, I love that. I think that's so special, and you know, it's necessary in
Hmm.
a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's an important part of the grieving process. And I think especially when I talked about this with Sarah Kagan of the Cry of Grief counseling episode. Can't remember what we called it, but like we're type A grievers where like you have it all blocked out and you say, okay, I can grieve
Stage
here to
one,
here.
January to March. Stage two, March through April. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to let go of that construct because it's not reality. And deep emotion flows when it wants to, right? And there's energetic flows in and out. And the idea is just to keep moving forward and keep the energy, regenerating the positive energy as you can go through the process. And there is light on the other side of dark. That's
As sure as night into day. It's looking to
Mhm.
nature and the consistent, steadfast examples of life around us and how
Mhm.
we are all part of that. And these
Yeah.
metaphors are just so important to be close to. And like you said, that creative energy close with that positive flow through the night,
Hmm.
through the periods of darkness.
Yeah.
And, I think that, you know, there's a big mystery too, to life as it is, and the life of those we love still that are no longer physically with us, and to engage them as companions on the journey is a really special thing, and embracing that mystery.
Yeah.
listening, and just being open to what your thinking mind wants to understand and quantify, and to be able to let it go into more of that visceral, organic, free, unbound, creative connection. And, just studying the great artists of the past, it was that space is what informed them of what to create. And that space holds so much. And it holds, in my experience, I think it holds everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And all an individual, of these people that we knew and know, to welcome that with humility and allow that to be empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question 10. What has been the most challenging part of the grieving process for you?
I think for me, the most challenging part of the grief journey is that each individual has their own relationship with their loved one, and no one else truly understands or feels the pain to that extent, right? Whether you lost a child or you lost your grandma or your father or a sibling, it's so everyone has a different relationship and everyone experiences grief differently. And so my journey, while it's similar to someone else's, is still different and unique in its own way. And I think just feeling lonely in that, but also being grateful that I had community. My husband lost his dad unexpectedly just before we met. And so, he's was such an integral part of helping me in the grieving journey or along this process. But one thing that was really tough was reentry into work. And, life continues after you lose your loved one and, after the dust settles, after the celebration of life or the funeral, and everyone is like, oh, I said my condolences. Like, let's keep moving forward because their day-to-day life didn't change, but mine did. And so I think that's something that I really hone in on when other people have lost loved ones is that I understand how hard the day to day is because their day to day is different. But now the hardest part was feeling joy. Like I didn't think I would be happy or feel joy again. Or perhaps I was just numb because it was a year of grieving before she actually passed.
Mhm.
And so it was just so overwhelming raising a newborn and caring for my mom at the end of her life. And so I was just like emotionally taxed. And so when she passed, I was still on antidepressants. And I think that kind of evens you out also. And so you don't really feel the full spectrum of the emotions. Yeah, I just felt depleted of all joy. And so it took probably a year for me to feel joy once more to the extent that I did before my mom's passing. Yeah. So that part of, well, Lisa is always the positive one. And when positivity isn't there, it's like, well, who am I then? Right? Where's that self-identity? And, there's always the external view of what people see, and then the internal, like what your internal thoughts and struggles are that people don't see that are behind closed doors, right? But
Mm.
I've always been one to say, like, hey, if you're my friend, I'm going to share everything with you because that's just who I am. And I feel that I'm able to process things better when I can speak fully instead of like, yeah, I'm doing okay, doing great. I'm like,
Yeah.
actually, no, I'm like, I don't really
I'm
talk
not okay. Yeah,
to.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important to have that expression.
Yeah. Yeah. Like actually having a really a tough time as I'm, going through this. And so yeah, that's the most challenging part was not being able to feel joy in the same way until later. Yeah, just feeling alone in the process. But I do think since starting Giving Grief Grace, there's such a supportive community and it's just reaffirmed my my hope with humanity and like humans are so special and I'm so grateful for this community and for all of the people that I've gotten to meet and all of the different aspects of the death and dying culture that I've learned through it. So,
Hmm.
yeah. When one door closes, another opens.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I'm curious, looking back on that period where you weren't able to access that joy or that happiness, was it kind of this progressive slope up into that state of groundedness and like being able to feel that joy again, or was there kind of this moment that snapped you into like an awareness of being able to access it?
I just remember, so we moved from North Carolina to Maine to care for my mom for that year. First year of my daughter's life, last year of mom's life. And
Hmm.
then after mom passed, we stayed in Maine through a month after, a month and a half after she passed. And then we moved back to North Carolina. And it was in the springtime in North Carolina that I was walking back to my house and I laughed. And I don't remember what I laughed about, but I just remember laughing and feeling the sense of joy.
Mm,
And that was oh.
it's
I
there.
don't have to feel sad. Like, is this what happiness feels like? And so it was that moment of like, oh, okay,
Mm,
lost my mom, but I'm gonna be okay. And it was in the spring. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I just remember saying, oh, okay. So maybe it was 6 months, after or 8 months after she'd passed. That one turning point for me was like, okay, I now have felt it,
hmm.
in this post, and it also was like postpartum as well,
Yeah,
where I think any mom would say your kind of emotions are all out of whack anyway. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And it's interesting just for people to listen and be like, oh, 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years, it's been five for me. Like, I'm still not feeling joy anymore. Like, there's all this judgment and time frame comparison with the culture. It's just the culture we live in to compare performance and
Mm. Mm.
achievement and ability.
Yeah.
But I love how you brought that in to be like, all of our experiences are individually unique.
Yeah.
And that process, there's certain things you can do to help move it along. I think the fact that you shared and were so okay with not being okay and
Yeah.
allowing that dialogue to connect you to yourself and to a community is something a lot of people that I've met have a hard time accessing because of certain narratives that they believe that they just need to buck up and move along and forget about it and stop talking about it and stop feeling the pain.
Yeah.
And in the long run, that will wipe you out.
Hmm.
All those bottled up things, they just come out and disease and mental illness and just ongoing numbness of life, and you never feel. It's that community and expression and connection and discovering meaning and discovering life in that different form. It's so important. Thank you for reflecting that because there are tools.
There are tools. And again, I've said this before, but when working with funeral directors, they say it's so important to celebrate and honor your loved one instead of just saying, oh, well, it's the middle of the winter. We can't bury them right now. We're just not going to have a service. And it's okay if they passed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but it's still important to have some sort of
Ceremony.
commemorate memorial. And
Yeah.
also thinking about my own grief journey, I started giving grief grace in October of 23, which was a year and a month after my mom died.
Mm,
And that's when I started feeling better. But they say acts of service help with grief, and I would agree 100%, especially just in the space of being able to talk about it's okay that you're not okay. Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Service, allowing for your pain to become compassion.
Mm,
A
hmm.
lot of people, just through the Ash Rose, it's allowed for some people to reflect on, sometimes the more burdensome aspects of like regret and transforming that into responsibility. And it's that
Mm,
same desire to serve and desire to own it and not just dread it and let it overwhelm you with negativity, but instead it's like, what can you take hold of now and integrate into yourself with power and express that into the world as a force of good? And that's liberating.
yeah.
Yeah. All these ways, just with what you're offering through your community, there's just so many opportunities for people to just see a light and follow it. And it comes at the right time so many times. We have to go through those dark corridors of loneliness and despair in order to be like, whoa, I'm on rock bottom. I don't want to go any further. And hey, what's over there? I see a little glimmer in the distance. I'm going to go check it out. And the more that we can choose to put that into the world for others, I think, like what you're doing with the act of service, that brings meaning. And I love the difference between suffering and pain. And Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, just narrates that perspective so powerfully of
Mhm.
you can choose suffering because pain is just pain. It's just a feeling. But suffering is pain without meaning.
Mm. Suffering is pain without moving.
Without meaning. Yeah.
Meaning.
Meaning. Yeah, without purpose.
Yeah.
And so he was able to shift within, and I just read this quote yesterday, actually. It was in one of my hospice onboarding things, but it was a quote from him that said, when you can't change the circumstances around you, that's a sign that you must change from within.
Mm.
You can't change the death, you
Yeah.
know? There's no reversing those things, but you can change how you relate to that death.
Yes. And how you talk about it and how
Right.
your inner dialogue and
Everything. Yeah. There's so much you can change, there's so much you can't. And I think so many people get stuck on the things that they can't change. And that
Mhm.
just grip and hold on to those things. And
Yeah.
I like the metaphor of, what we're doing. We're releasing the lid off of that thing
Yeah.
that stays and can't be changed according to what we believe sometimes. And we're choosing to take the lid off, take a piece of it, and choose to change something. And
Yeah.
it's just a step, it's just a metaphor for so many other things that you can choose and change within yourself. And yeah, that relationship, like you said, that narrative, that perspective.
You can change your perspective. There's a funny, this is an aside, but I I found a colleague who had passed away, and I went to her house to check on her, and she had passed in the night. And so after that, I had a grief counselor come into work and work with us, but I didn't do one-on-one counseling. And so every single night, I thought that um, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, like was going to die in his sleep.
Hmm.
And every night I would like wake up in a cold sweat and like, oh, he died. Like he died. He died beside me. I used to get after him all the time because he snores really bad. We found out it was because of our cat and he's very allergic.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But then I changed my perspective and said, if he's snoring, he's still alive. So then every night when he was snoring, I was like, he's still
You
alive.
just sneak the cat in there. It's like, okay,
Like,
I want to know you're here.
but so that's how my perspective changed from
Hmm.
anger, like, oh, I can't sleep because your snoring is terrible, to then like, okay, I know that you're snoring, so you're not dead. So that gives me comfort. It's a different
Signs of life.
perspective.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just, sometimes you just have to change your perspective on loss and how you view the same thing. So
Mm.
anyway.
Yeah. Great analogies. I love it. So much to learn.
Yeah. So,
Uh, 11. Reflect on moments when you've experienced healing or relief. What contributed to those moments?
yeah. So I think really part of the healing journey is honoring, at least for me, has been honoring my mom in unique and fun ways and seeing other people experience joy on behalf of her. Like
Mm.
we talked about last week, the bench at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, like a quiet space to reflect amongst the garden. Or going to Monet's garden and actually putting her ashes there. That was such a part of the healing process. And I felt like
Mm.
it was the closing of a chapter, which was hard for me, but also it was such a beautiful chapter, one that we cherished for so many years, or we planned for so many years. Or doing the event at the library in town and seeing kids being able to read and play with one another and create art together. That is just such a part of the healing process. And then being able to talk about it, my experience on the podcast and talking with others in small groups of, that's all been part of the healing journey and has allowed me to live life more fully because I'm not, like we talked about earlier, I'm not numb anymore. And I'm able to feel the full spectrum of highs and lows and be okay with that.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you chose fun ways too. I think the whimsy and like the playfulness of remembrance can be such a sweet thing because we want to be so somber sometimes and you
Mhm.
know, but I think that there's something really beautiful about the playful, humorous aspect of like, hey, you're still here. This moment of joy is
Yeah.
still a way to bring them in and the silliness and the playfulness and just, especially if that reflects a part of her character, which it sounds like it really does, with those crazy sunglasses and stuff. I mean,
Yeah, very much so. And I do have quiet meditation is also part of the healing journey, especially when I'm experiencing immense stress or grief. I'll walk outside and like feeling the sunshine on my face and just being in nature, hearing the birds, right? And then this is more alternative, but I spoke to a medium on my mom's birthday, and that was such a joyful time. We were laughing throughout, and I just felt like I was having a conversation with mom through this woman. And again, that it's just part of my healing journey. It's not wrong or right, but that's something that's just helped me.
yeah, well, you've been open to explore tools, and
Yeah.
different modalities of connection. People have opinions, everybody does, but I always encourage openness. I really do. There's so much we don't know, and just working forefront with death for so many years. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've brought into this work. It's just there's so much we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure you see such profound changes or
Hmm.
energy movement through the work that you do. And it's
Yeah,
been,
it's surprising sometimes, in combination with working up to the point of death and then with people after death and finding these bridge points between the two. And yeah, it's a wonderful, mysterious thing, this energy of life and who we are for a while, it's poetic stuff. What can you say? But but yeah, I think that that's great that you have this balance, and I think that's a great example of like there are times to be quiet and still and serious and direct, and then there's times to be open and free and
Mhm.
whimsical and
Yeah.
it's the dance. So
Hmm.
it's good.
Yeah. And I will tell listeners another part of the grief journey or healing journey was I did have a grief counselor for a year after mom passed
Good
that I'd
support.
worked with while she was sick. And so she kind of was with me through the whole
Oh,
process.
she worked with you through that whole
Hmm.
like anticipatory and then the actual loss. Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. That's a
Yeah. Through
wonderful
the Dempsey
resource.
Center in Maine. It was definitely much needed for me.
Yeah. Maybe just as a side note, are there ways people can just like look up resources for grief counselors if they're experiencing a loss or if they're like navigating one presently and then they want some follow up after.
There are so many resources. If people are in Maine, there's the Dempsey Center. I'm working with another woman, A Haven in Connecticut. And then there's We Care Out Loud. That's also Bradley Cooper's foundation that's helping people who are caregivers and then before and after. So there are lots of supports, networks, and you can usually Google and find
Mm-hmm.
support in your area, but also in HR, I always talk about the Employee Assistance Program. You usually get 3 free counseling sessions per year if someone is looking for support in in that process. Then please reach out to your HR person and ask about your Employee Assistance Program or the EAP. And otherwise, you could message me and I would be happy to help. Hello@lisahartung.com. I'll find some resources.
Great. Important to have guidance and support. Number 12. How do you feel about the idea of turning ashes into art? What meaning does this transformation hold for you?
Mom would again love the idea of being repurposed and upcycled. So I think, turned into blooms. She'd be like, yes, thank you. Like,
Mhm.
that's like a beautiful way to show her. I don't know if I told you, but my mom was Miss Maine.
Miss Maine. Oh,
Yeah.
no way. That's awesome.
So when she was in college, she was Miss Maine. And so she and Bob Hope, exchanged holiday letters up until Bob Hope passed away. But there was always an element of like wanting beautification and like wanting
Glam. Yeah. Oh,
to
yeah.
like so I think that she would like being beautiful in this ash rose portrait.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love that. Beauty is such an important thing. Beauty is elevation and it's expansion and it's gratitude.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I think that those things are so needed in death.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get there. It's hard to connect those dots. And yeah, I love to hear that you feel like she would really be receptive and excited about being turned into these blooms. It's so poetic to me. Just, everybody's relationship's different with this project and how their loved one like relates to the theme of the portrait and the metaphor of the portrait. And, the gallery has so many examples of that, but I love the fact that she was the gardener and she planted the seeds in the garden and in her family, and all who knew her. And now she gets to be celebrated as the garden itself.
Yeah, and she was an artist, so becoming
And that,
art
right.
again, how cool is that?
It's
Right?
like the ultimate, right? It just is the artist literally becoming art with such a context. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it. That's wonderful.
so special.
Yeah,
Like rebirth, legacy,
right.
generation. Yeah.
Number 13, how does participating in this project connect with your own sense of purpose or growth?
So I think for me, it's helping to tell mom's story and keeping her light alive in this way. And I think it's also healing because as like on this journey, I've been able to walk through. I've done a lot of grief processing on lots of different modalities, but it's been helpful to process grief in a new way through this project. It's nice to talk about things verbally with you. And so it's not just, between me and my journal. Verbally processing again is something that's helpful for me. Not everyone's a verbal processor, but one thing that, and I'm excited for the next 2 weeks because sometimes I think about Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, how he always talks about his past and how it was like his glory days. And I
Hmm.
talk about my upbringing all the time and like how much I loved growing up in a small town and just the community that we had there. And I talk about my mom all the time. And at some point, people are like, all right, Lisa, that was like 30 years ago. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's putting a pin in this moment in time and then being able to spring forth with new light and ideas and maybe not being so Uncle Rico about things.
The glory days.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the balance of remembering and responding.
Yeah.
You know, it's the action you take with those gifts. And I think they can rest dormant for too long in some of us. You know, that
Hmm.
it's just a memory and it's like, oh, that was great. Oh, I'm so glad that we had that. I'm glad that she was that. I'm glad that, that gift was given to me. And then it's like, now you have all of this to give. You can move that through and feel the richness of that movement and not be stuck in the memory, but it's making the new memories and it's keeping that person alive, that light
Mhm.
alive. And the talking and the writing and a lot of people go through this and like, I've never journaled before. I don't journal. And I'm like, well, you are now. And it's really helpful because it opens different relationships with yourself and your feelings because you're writing from within
Mhm.
and then you're speaking it without to someone else. And then that goes even further. What we offer as the community aspect of this project, it's like the work can be witnessed by millions of people. And that story of your mother can be celebrated and reflected in millions of hearts and be received as a beacon of possibility.
Mm.
And and that's a big deal with technology today, like
Oh
that's
my
I like
gosh.
to keep this so intimate because it is this. And then just what we have for healing purposes to share that story and to influence and affect and inspire so many others. That's just a huge honoring of what that light still is and can expand into becoming even more.
Mm. Yeah. Like such a gift.
It is. The world needs gifts like this, they need hope.
Yeah. And the idea of new life and light,
Hmm.
rebirth, growth doesn't have to be dark and doom and gloom all the time.
For a time, as it needs to be for some, and
Yeah.
maybe everyone in some regard, but it doesn't stay there. It doesn't have to.
It's a season.
Right.
And it does come back, right? Like,
It rolls back around, and then hopefully by the next round of that darkness, you have a whole new perspective of resources, of hope, of being able to embrace that shadow in a new way. And it's not the same as it was before. It's like we can't on this river of life, it's never the same stream that we step into. And I
mhm.
think the more that we can, learn how to row and float and navigate the currents, when we come across that challenge again, we're so much more equipped, and we can even maybe see it as something beautiful as well. To be like, wow, this grief, this darkness, this pain, this despair is reflecting something to me, and it's really love at the bottom of it all.
Mhm.
It's disguised as pain and negativity or whatever narrative still floating around in there, but at the heart of it, you can learn to pierce through the veil a little faster and to be like, ah, that's showing me love. That's showing me that there's still so much love.
Yeah. The love and the joy and mhm. Deep down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Number 14. What is one way this process has surprised or challenged you so far?
I wrote this down, so I was like, I have been very verbal in my processing. I don't think that one can ever do too much processing, but I thought I was more emotional than I thought I would be in this journaling process. And I think because part of me compartmentalized the grief. I wasn't able to fully, not unleash, but maybe move through the feelings at that point in time. Again, because I was a new mom. moving back to North Carolina, I'd also started a new job right before my daughter was born. And so a
Wow.
lot of things that were all in there. And so that surprised me most, like collecting the photos for you and putting together highlights of her life and projects, both physical and art related, that she had done, like compiling all of those. We did it for her celebration of life, but then doing it again for you was a challenge for me because then it's like, how do you sum up someone's life in X number of photos? When you go through the through the album, I think there's probably 50 photos in there, so just go fast or just like look at them in gallery mode. But I kept on saying, like, is this enough? Like, does this capture the true essence of who my mom was? So that was, that's always a challenge, right? And I'm sure that is for you as the artist of like, how do I honor this person and
Hmm.
their family as a legacy? It was a good process. It challenged me more than I thought it would. And it unearthed some sadness, but there's also so much love and positivity. Like being able to share her stories. Like after I come out of our meetings being like, Mom was just the best.
Hmm.
Like,
Right.
it's just fun to share stories. And so I think that's something for listeners to take away too, is the more you can talk about your loved one, you feel their warmth almost, right? And so it's good to not avoid and not suppress the heartache, but let it shine because that is your love, right? Deep down inside, that's the love. And allow those feelings to flow.
Yeah, and not like, just allow those moments to come as they do instead of like, the performance aspect of I have to make everything a part of her life is like, as clear as possible every time you share or anything like that, but just relax and let those most forefront moments at that time come through. And, I'm sure it was hard sorting through the top 50. And, I really feel
Mm.
it is what it needs to be. It always is. As long as you move through it with the best of your heart, that it ends up being a perfect expression for the time. And in this artistic process, yeah, it's like top tier quality standards as far as being able to weave all these things together is just like a craft point of view. And it's a wonderful process of just surprises, really. Like just to be like, oh wow, I see how that connects, and then to just weave these moments together into this piece where I think that's the beauty of art in this regard is that you can, a picture says 1,000 words, but like a piece of art can speak to 1,000 pictures.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you can take moments and compose and orchestrate meaning within something like this that is just so full of layers. And really it's that power that through this sharing and through all these things that you're putting out there and you're informing is contained in that singular work. And all of that will be reminded when you look at it, when you feel it. And it's like a meditation point. And some people call it a talisman or a portal or
Yeah.
a sanctuary and a window. And it just it's a tool also. It's something that can connect you in a way that maybe something else couldn't. It's unique in that way, and just knowing what it's made of and you've poured yourself into it and how that's connected. It is you and it is them. Like it's both, and that metaphor I think is pretty forefront. It's this blending of the two. It's the blending of life and death.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the blending of life and death.
Yeah, I've never said that before. That just kind of came out. Thank you. That's nice. Wow.
It's
Yeah, and
true,
that's what
right?
it
I
is.
mean, you
Yeah.
like physically blend her ashes with charcoal. So,
Yeah, and charcoal is not so different than us, it's just a
yeah.
tree instead of a human, and
Yeah.
that's a meditation too. It's like whenever I draw, I'm using death to create life. I
Hmm.
am collaborating with death, with decay, to create new blooms of life. And that's a nice meditation there too. It just how that speaks to so many other aspects of life
Hmm.
and what we learn and what we choose.
Yeah. And what we carry with us.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we give.
Yeah, it's been such a journey, Ian. I don't half do things, so I go all in. But I didn't know I would be moved as much as I have been in this journey. So thank you for creating that space.
Well, thank you for stepping into it. It's because of you that this is happening. And so thank you for sharing it. And thank you for being willing to share it and in a podcast. I mean, what a gift.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun being able to talk about things, and I hope that some parts resonate with listeners, and so they know that they're not alone on this journey. And
Hmm.
the grief journey is wide and unknown and wild and
Yeah.
and joyful, right? I think there are fun times like this, like an instance like this, to really celebrate loved ones in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And finding the beauty, discovering the beauty within these moments. I
Mhm.
think that's so important.
And
And
it's again changing our perspective, right? Of like
mm,
they are gone, but they are still with us. And now they'll be with us in a new physical way through this portrait. And so I think that's something that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Ian, and for guiding us on this journey on week 2 of, processing the creative through grief. And week 1 was honoring the past, week 2 is processing, and then week 3 is,
finding meaning in the present.
hmm,
It's a
okay,
good one. They all have their gems, but it's essentially embracing the present moment and acknowledging the journey of transformation.
okay. So stay tuned. We will be back next week. But thank you again, Ian, for all of the time and effort and energy that you've put into this Ash Rose project for everyone to enjoy. And then again, for just allowing me to be on this journey with you. I've really enjoyed it thus far. And so look forward to catching up next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Giving Grief Grace. If you found the content interesting and think it could help a friend or a loved one, please share it with them. Subscribe to this podcast and get a weekly dose of positivity. And while you're at it, please leave a review. If you enjoyed the show and want to support me financially on my grief journey, I'm raising funds for Project Purple, a nonprofit whose mission is to see a world without pancreatic cancer. And I'll leave a link to my fundraising page in the show notes. If you've lost a loved one and are looking for support in an online community, consider joining our free private Facebook group, Giving Grief Grace. May you be kind to yourself in the week ahead and give yourself grace. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.